All right, I have been teaching for 18 years, and grading was a struggle for me for a long time because my university experience never explained how to set up a grading rubric or how to determine how many points to put on that rubric. So this was just a lot of trial and error over the years, and now I've come to a point where it's pretty simplistic for me to create grading rubrics. So I hope these tips and tricks help you feel more confident as you begin to build your own rubrics also. So I think the easiest thing to begin with is to maybe look at rubrics that are not effective. There was a situation in my department where parents were complaining that their children were failing their art class, and the teacher in question just kept saying, I'm using rubrics, I'm grading fairly. Well, when we dug into it a little deeper, we discovered that the rubrics were not allowing students an opportunity to demonstrate their learning, and the rubric was not mathematically set up correctly to give students an opportunity to actually earn a decent grade on the assignment. So here are some issues with some of these rubrics. First thing you need to determine is, are you grading on total points or are you grading on percentages? I don't do percentages, I just do total points because it's easier for my brain to figure out. So you need to determine how many total points your assignment is going to be worth, and then decide how many categories that you want or the criteria that you want to use to grade on. So I tend to make my assignments worth 100 points or 50 points, something that's divisible by 5, and I have 5 categories on my rubrics, which this teacher also did. However, you can't be arbitrary in the numbers you decide to put on your categories. So the first category is correct. If you divide 100 by 5, it's 20 points in the first category. But the next 3 categories are where the issue was taking place with students not passing assignments, because if the student was going to get 5 points on the far right-hand side in each criteria, when you add that up, that's a total of 25 points. When you divide 25 by 100, they're going to earn an F on that assignment. The third column over, the satisfactory column, if they get 10 points in every category, that only equals 50 points. Well, 50 divided by 100 is also an F. The second category, if they get the good category in every one, that totals 75 points. Well, I'll divide that by 100, and that's a C. So this grading rubric only allows students an opportunity to earn 100% in the excellent category, a C, and then 2 Fs in the last 2 columns. So that's the biggest concern about this grading rubric. But then you also need to look at your criteria to see how you are evaluating, and you shouldn't be penalizing kids more than once in your criteria for the same thing. So in this grading rubric, their craftsmanship, so this was a clay project. So the craftsmanship says that the mug does not appear rushed and is not sloppy. The mug has minimal cracks. All pieces are still attached and is not blown up in the kiln. The glazing of the mug has been carefully done and does not appear rushed or last minute. That sounds great. Then the criteria below that is problem solving. And this says the student pursued challenges and overcame them through appropriate problem solving and with a good attitude. Student does not give up throughout the project and has been adaptable throughout the making process. That is very wordy, but also very vague. And in my opinion, it's too closely tied to craftsmanship. So their craftsmanship has suffered up above because of their lack of problem-solving skills or determination. So in my opinion, they're getting penalized 2 times for the same thing. Then the bottom part of this rubric is referring to their rough draft drawing. So they're getting graded on their planning sheet in this whole project that's a final project for the unit. And that indicator is a check for understanding that should be its own grade in the grade book, not on a final project rubric. A check for understanding is when students have completed guided practice and independent practice, and now they're demonstrating you that they're ready for the final project. So that grade should not be embedded in this project. That should be a standalone grade that should be its own thing. Okay, so here is another example of a rubric that was unfairly grading students. If you look at the math categories, so this was a 20-point assignment, and the numbers are just so arbitrary. I mean, if you look across each indicator, the numbers are just kind of crazy with how they were chosen. So if you look at the needs improvement category, the most they can earn is 8 out of 20 points. Well, when you divide that, that's an F. Satisfactory is a D, And then it's a little better because the good category allows them to earn a B, but still they can get 100%, a B, a D, or an F on this assignment. Then another concern is this criteria, effort and creativity. The student demonstrated creativity in their design. Well, what does that actually mean? What is that criteria judging? It's not clearly defined for students on how to attain that particular standard. That is just pure teacher subjectivity. Okay, then we have this rubric right here. Again, if we go straight to the total points, it's unfairly assessing what they know, because excellent, they get 100, good, they get a C, satisfactory is an F, and needs improvement is an F. That is not fairly grading a student at all. Then we have, this was a surrealism project. So the project requirement is explaining that the artist incorporated surrealism into their landscape. Sounds great. But then you go down to problem solving, and the verbiage says the artist has created a creative and imaginative landscape that imitates the art style of surrealism in a way that is original. Where you're penalizing them 2 times for the same criteria. Surrealism should only be mentioned once, so that they're only losing points in one location. And then this last one, again, the numbers are off on that one. But in this example, the students are being penalized 3 times for the demonstration of accurate use of details using a grid and their oil pastel technique, because that is mentioned in project requirements, craftsmanship, and problem solving. So that needed to be eliminated from 2 of those 3 categories so that it's only one place where they're being penalized. So I think it can help to look at rubrics that had problems before we then move into some ways to like really create successful rubrics. So in our department, here's kind of the guidance that we follow. Number 1, determine how many points you want the assignment to be worth. And then there's kind of suggested point values that your major projects are worth the most points, smaller projects are fewer, etc. In our department, we don't assign homework. Homework is optional. If they don't finish an assignment during class, then they can finish it for homework. Number 2, it is best to create rubrics when you design the project so that you know what parameters you're grading and you can communicate that with students in the beginning. A rubric should reflect student learning and remove subjectivity from the teacher, if at all possible. Number 3, clearly defined rubrics can help students self-assess during project time. They are empowered, or the teacher is empowered to then redirect student effort based upon the grading criteria. So if you've got your rubric pre-printed and given to students ahead of time, or it's projected on the screen, when you get a student who clearly hasn't finished the assignment, or their craftsmanship is really poor, they've just rushed, and they say they're finished, this is when I go back to the grading rubric and I say, okay, in my opinion, if I were to grade this today, here's where you would land on the rubric. You would fall into the needs improvement category. Is that really where you want to stay? And I always let my students make that choice for themselves, but most of the time they'll say, no, I want to do better. And then I can point to the specific category on the rubric to say, okay, you haven't met the criteria for excellent in these parameters. So here's where you can keep working on your assignment. And it takes away a lot of the power struggle between teachers and students when you can just be like, hey, here's how you're being graded. You decide how you're going to improve it if you want to improve it. Then number 4, rubrics make grading so quickly and takes away the guessing game. So when I was a new teacher, I hated grading. It took me forever to grade because I didn't know how to fairly grade it. And it was very stressful for me to figure out the math and like, it was just awful. But now that I have these rubrics in place, grading goes very quickly and it takes away the guessing on the math portion for me. Our school uses Schoology and we can digitize these rubrics and it's just a very fast process. Number 5, I have made all my rubrics digital. So students literally have to log on to the computer to see the grade that they got on the assignment. And that has eliminated so much argument when I pass back artwork. I literally just give them back their work of art. There's no grade on the back. There's no paper rubric. They have to take their own responsibility to go to the computer on their own time and look at their assignment. And then we can have conversations if they disagree with the rubric. And the same thing with parents too. Then again, number 6, kind of reiterating, rubric categories should not penalize students more than once for the same thing. In our department, we specifically determined that we want to assess students on following directions, craftsmanship, and studio habits. So we embed our participation grade into our studio habits because we're not allowed to give a participation grade, but we can kind of hide it within the verbiage. So we've come up with a studio habit category, which is basically the student was on task each class period. They used materials respectfully. They cleaned up their workspace each day, and they contributed positively to the learning environment. So studio habits is where I can take points away from students who are disruptive, students who are distracting themselves or others, instead of me saying, you were off task or annoying or disrespectful. I just say you weren't contributing positively to the learning environment. And then here's kind of an example of what my grading rubrics look like. So when I do the math, my excellent, and if you look at my verbiage, I have excellent, good, needs improvement, and did not demonstrate. So in our department, we've determined that if a student turns something in, they will at minimum earn a 70% or a C. So my third category, the needs improvement, has to numerically equal a C for that letter grade. Did not demonstrate, they're getting a 0. They literally didn't do it. There's nothing for me to assess, so they get the 0, and that rarely happens in my classroom. But for the most part, students can land an excellent or good. So if this was a 100-point assignment, 100 divided by 5 categories is 20, and then you have to do the math to figure out what number is going to get you a B, what number is going to get you a C. So you can see how that math works out right there. Then here's kind of how our criteria look. So we are assessing following directions. So there's 3 categories on here that, actually on this one there's 4 that are all about following directions or craftsmanship. So this was a clay project. So you can see how they constructed their clay box was a category. Their technique for working with clay was another category, meaning did they wedge the clay, roll the clay evenly? Did they attach their pieces well enough so things didn't fall apart? Then they painted these clay projects, so there was a painting grade, but that one's also kind of addressing craftsmanship. Students had to choose a theme that represented their interests or hobbies, and they wrote about that to kind of explain what their theme was. So those 4 categories are concrete evidence that students can visually demonstrate. Not a lot of that is teacher subjective. It's like literally, did you do it or not? And then there's that studio habit parameter. Here is another project rubric that was 50 points. So when you do the math and you divide it out, your excellent category should be 10 points each. Good is 8 because it equals a B. Needs improvement is 7 points because that equals a C. And then again, did not demonstrate. So this was a 2D assignment that they were creating a drawing of a principle of design. So you can see there are 3 categories here that are following directions. They don't repeat in what the criteria is in each one. Then the 4th category is a craftsmanship. That's a standalone. And then we've got our studio habits right there. So that's kind of how we set up our grading rubrics to fairly assess students based on our department's goal of following directions, craftsmanship, and studio habits. But sometimes there are assignments where it's just a completion grade. For example, when we do class critiques and they're answering questions, looking at their artwork or another student's artwork, and I just simply want to grade, did they complete it? So here's an example of how at the bottom of a worksheet, I might just do a 10-point for an A, an 8-point for a B, and a 7-point for a C, and then that's based on how complete the answers are or how well the answers make sense, because kids will write gibberish and it makes no sense. So hopefully that helps you when it comes to setting up your grading for this coming school year.